Let me tell you something. $3 million isn't just money. It's a lifetime of sacrifice. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, decided that sacred value was merely an accessory for her little New York party. She broke into my safe, took the Vance family diamond, and paraded it for the world to see. When I confronted her, she played the innocent victim. But when my jeweler called the truth, hit me like a train. She didn't just steal it for a night. She replaced the damn diamond. Welcome. I am Eleanor Vance, 62 years young, and up until recently, I considered myself a woman who had mastered the art of success and stability. I'm certainly not the caricatured monster-in-law you see in the movies. My late husband, God rest his soul, left me a thriving multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio across New England. I built on that foundation, ensuring my son Ethan would never want for anything. Ethan is my pride, a brilliant 35-year-old corporate attorney. 2 years ago, he married Chloe. She's 29, a vibrant interior designer with a magnetic personality, and she quickly became the center of Ethan's world. Initially, I was charmed. I went out of my way to be the modern, non-interfering mother-in-law. I gifted her luxury items and welcomed her into the Vance name with open arms. The ring, the $3 million Tiffany Legacy diamond ring, is more than jewelry. It's the cornerstone of our family's history. It had been stored safely, waiting for the right moment for Chloe to receive it as a testament to my trust. I thought she respected the legacy. I thought she valued belonging. I handed her a spare key to my safe as a symbol of acceptance, a gesture of profound faith. I see now that I wasn't welcoming a daughter. I was arming a thief. That key, my gesture of love, became the tool she used to tear our family apart. You see me now as a strong, successful woman, but deep down I carry an old, searing wound. My father died suddenly, leaving my mother to battle ruthless business partners who tried to seize everything. My childhood was defined by the visceral fear of financial loss and betrayal, the paralyzing anxiety of watching everything you hold dear slip away due to someone else's greed. That $3 million ring wasn't just an asset. It was a testament to my mother's resilience, a sacred symbol of what we fought to keep. That's why its safety is paramount. It embodies the soul of the Vance family, and my vigilance is my armor. When I talk about the ring, my face, usually composed and authoritative, shifts. My eyes betray a flicker of deep-seated anxiety, almost a preemptive grief. I find myself subconsciously reaching for my chest, the spot where I used to carry the spare safe key. My hand, strong from years of signing contracts, would subtly tremble at the mere thought of that vault being compromised. My sensitivity regarding money isn't stinginess, it's a trauma response. Decades ago, a close business associate cheated me out of a significant sum. That betrayal left me with a permanent lens of skepticism. I've learned to constantly scan people's motives, viewing every kind word and gesture through the filter of potential deceit. With Chloe, this fear was magnified. I saw a hunger in her that made me uneasy. Whenever she complimented my jewels, her gaze wasn't purely admiring. It held a certain possessiveness. I distinctly recall the time I showed her the ring, and she had an almost imperceptible, unconscious frown, a brief flash of frustration when I explained it was stored for safekeeping. She had smiled wide, but the smile never quite reached her eyes. They remained cold, calculated. These tiny subconscious cues were enough to trigger my internal defense system. I'd whisper to myself, "Don't be naive, Eleanor. Protect your territory. Protect Ethan's future. I know this history makes me prone to misunderstandings, but it's the only way I know how to guard myself against a fatal, catastrophic blow." I was desperate for her to be genuine, but the fear of being fooled again was always the louder voice in my head. Before the colossal breach of trust, the relationship between Chloe and me was, for all appearances, exceptionally smooth. a testament to my efforts to foster a cordial modern dynamic. I meticulously maintained an exterior of elegant politeness, wanting the world to see the Vance family as harmonious, devoid of the toxic mother-in-law cliches. We had our rituals. Sunday mornings often found us sitting in my sun-drenched conservatory, sipping Earl Grey tea, and flipping through high-end design magazines. Chloe has exquisite taste, and I genuinely felt a sense of joy and lightness when she offered advice on renovating my coastal summer home in Nantucket. "Mother, this velvet fabric would make your drawing room sing," she'd exclaim with genuine enthusiasm and a sparkle in her eyes. I would respond with a gentle smile, feeling a warmth that came from shared interests. I genuinely thought, this is lovely. She's bringing vibrancy into Ethan's life and mine. I often showered her with thoughtful, expensive gifts, a vintage Chanel bag I no longer used, a pair of diamond earrings from my personal collection. Each time Chloe would offer a soft hug, her body language conveying genuine appreciation. She would look at me with clear eyes, expressing sincere gratitude. I believed we were cultivating a bright, positive bond, one that would honor the Vance legacy. Ethan was delighted by our apparent camaraderie. He'd often remark, "Mom and Chloe, you two are the dream team. Thank you for being so welcoming to her." His happiness was the primary fuel for my efforts to keep the peace and maintain this exuberant relationship. I had willingly accepted Chloe as the future matriarch of our family, the pinnacle of my trust. The moment I now look back on with agonizing regret was showing her the $3 million ring. I unlocked the safe and let her hold it. Her gasp of awe was immediate, her hands trembling slightly as she took in the dazzling diamond. "Mother, it's absolutely breathtaking," she whispered. I smiled proudly, my heart filled with an almost naive generosity. I said, "One day it will be yours, Chloe. Consider this my ultimate sign of trust and acceptance." That gesture, the act of giving her the spare safe key, was meant to embody my unconditional hope for our shared future. I was completely unaware that I had just given the predator the key to the chicken coop. The initial conflict, the one that cracked my carefully constructed facade of trust, began with a shocking image on a Monday evening. I was winding down watching the evening news when they featured a segment on the year's most exclusive social gathering, the Met Gala, in New York. Suddenly, the camera focused on my daughter-in-law, Chloe. She was posing on the red carpet, looking stunning in a designer gown. My face froze immediately. I hadn't known she was even in New York. She told Ethan she was attending a design conference in Boston, but the location wasn't the deepest cut. My eyes locked onto her hand. There, sparkling under the harsh flash bulbs, was the unmistakable sight of the Tiffany Legacy diamond ring, the $3 million Vance family heirloom. A cold, icy dread shot straight down my spine. My body went rigid, my hands clenching the arms of my velvet chair so tightly my knuckles went white. She took the ring out of the safe. Without a word to me, I knew I had given her the spare key. I had told her it would be hers someday. But someday was not tonight, and certainly not as a mere prop for a sensationalist public display. My first overwhelming emotion was profound insult. How little respect does this woman have for me? I had educated her on the ring's significance, its historical weight as a family legacy, not a trinket to complement a designer dress. My immediate misunderstanding was that Chloe was arrogantly trying to signal her new status by flaunting the Vance wealth without my permission. I thought she's trying to establish dominion over our family assets. She sees me as obsolete. Given my backstory of betrayal, this act was immediately magnified into a calculated act of aggression, a passive-aggressive declaration of war. I called Ethan instantly. My voice was tight with suppressed fury, a low, dangerous rumble. "Ethan, did you see Chloe on TV? The ring? Why is she wearing my ring?" Ethan's response was hesitant. "Mom, I think she just borrowed it. She said it was her Cinderella moment. Borrowed. That word felt like a physical blow. The expression on my face shifted from sheer anger to a deep, gut-wrenching hurt. My eyes felt hot, though I refused to cry. $3 million? And it's treated like a borrowed scarf. When Chloe finally returned a few days later, I confronted her in the drawing room. I struggled to keep my tone level, but my whole body was shaking with a barely contained tremor. Chloe, the ring. You accessed the safe and wore it without my knowledge or explicit permission. She attempted a nervous, dismissive laugh, her hand flying up to adjust her hair nervously. Oh, Mother, I am so sorry. I know I should have asked. But it was perfect with the gown. I just wanted to feel what it was like to wear it. I was so careful, I promise. Her gaze did not meet mine. It darted nervously around the room. It was not the look of true contrition, but the shifty, evasive eye contact of a child caught in a blatant lie. The sincerity I once admired was gone, replaced by a cheap attempt at manipulation and deflection. I looked down at our hands. My hands, which had worked to build and protect this legacy. Her hands, which had subtly, deceptively taken my trust. My feeling in that moment was one of utter devastation. It wasn't about the diamond yet. It was the wreckage of trust. She doesn't respect me. She thinks I am a fool she can easily manipulate. This was no small misunderstanding. This was a fundamental disregard for the person who had offered her acceptance. My fear had been confirmed. I had opened the door to someone who saw my kindness as weakness. The confrontation with Chloe left me simmering in a stew of anger and doubt. But the true turning point, the moment that shattered my perception and ignited my rage, happened 3 days later. Though Chloe had returned the ring, the incident was a persistent, stinging itch. I decided to take it to Mr. Sterling, my family's trusted private jeweler, for a comprehensive cleaning and inspection. I needed external reassurance that the peace and my judgment were still intact. I sat across from Mr. Sterling in his hushed private consultation room. Outwardly, I maintained my usual composed demeanor, but internally, I was a coiled spring of anxiety. Mr. Sterling carefully placed the ring under his specialized microscope, adjusting the lighting and focusing his attention on the colossal center stone. After several minutes of silence, minutes that felt like hours, he slowly removed his spectacles. His face carried an expression I had never seen on him, a mixture of professional surprise and genuine distress. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and cautious, "I am deeply sorry to have to tell you this, but the center stone is not the original diamond." That moment was a deafening silence. I felt the air rush out of my lungs and the room seemed to tilt violently. My entire body went into shock, paralyzed like I was encased in ice. "Impossible. This can't be happening." "What are you saying, Mr. Sterling?" My voice was barely a strangled whisper, hoarse and unfamiliar. He explained that the current stone lacked the unique internal laser inscription he had meticulously placed for the Vance family a decade ago. The cut was an expert imitation, but it lacked the fire, the internal brilliance, and the specific density of my original flawless diamond. "Someone has switched it, Eleanor. This stone is a remarkably high-quality lab-grown diamond, likely worth no more than $50,000. Your genuine stone, the one valued at over $3 million, it is gone." Boom. This was the definitive emotional explosion. This was no longer about disrespect or a boundary violation. This was felony theft. This was a systemic, calculated act of deception. My emotions instantly vaulted past anger, landing squarely on white-hot fury and profound soul-crushing anguish. She didn't just borrow it. She committed grand larceny. My eyes must have been spitting fire. I squeezed my hands into fists, so tight my nails dug painful crescent moons into my palms. I felt a core part of me, the part that holds hope and forgiveness, irrevocably shatter. The betrayal from a business partner years ago was bad, but this was by a woman I had welcomed into my son's life. into my home, into my bloodline. She thought she could steal the soul of the Vance family and get away with it. I flashed back to Chloe's expression during our confrontation, the darting eyes, the practiced apology. It wasn't the shame of a person making a minor mistake. It was the nervous energy of a criminal trying to cover her tracks. I stood up, my body suddenly infused with a steely, terrible calm. The soft, forgiving mother-in-law vanished, replaced by the relentless, betrayed CEO. She thinks I'm a gullible old woman. I'll show her what this gullible old woman does when she's cornered. My entire perspective changed. Chloe was not merely an ambitious, impulsive young woman. She was a ruthless, cold-blooded predator. The relationship was over. This was now Eleanor Vance, the victim, versus Chloe Vance, the thief. I stared at Mr. Sterling, my voice ringing with a frightening clarity. Do not breathe a word of this. And I need you to help me. Document the evidence, every single detail. I knew definitively that this was not a family dispute that could be resolved over tea. This was a war for justice, and I was going to win it. The icy shock from Mr. Sterling's revelation instantly melted into a cold, terrifying focus. I drove straight home, my face a mask of grim determination. The time for the heartbroken mother-in-law was over. It was time for Eleanor, the relentless CEO. The first thing I did was secure the crime scene. My hands, though still trembling slightly, were precise as I filmed the fake diamond in the safe, narrating the date and the swap for the record. This was my quiet, solitary moment of justice, laying the foundation of the case before the thief even knew I was onto her. I bypassed my usual family attorney and called Marcus Thorne, the sharpest legal shark in the city, the one who handles matters of intricate fraud. I laid out the theft, the timing, the fake stone, and my fears. Thorne, a man who rarely showed emotion, leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a professional excitement that mirrored the fierce tension coiling in my gut. We move now, Eleanor, like ghosts. I felt a jolt of fierce vindication. I had an ally and the game had begun. Following Thorne's advice, I moved to secure every vulnerable point. I had every lock in my house, including the safe combination, changed immediately. I didn't want Chloe to have a chance to take anything else or plant evidence. While the locksmith was working, I had a covert surveillance system installed, small undetectable cameras that watched every entrance and, crucially, the shared spaces of the apartment where my son and his wife lived. My gaze was sharp, scanning the rooms, checking angles. It felt unsettling, this invasion of privacy, but the feeling of grim necessity overcame all scruples. She forfeited her right to privacy when she stole $3 million. Then came the financial strike, the soft underbelly of Chloe's ambition. I personally sent the instruction to the bank to freeze her supplementary credit cards and block the monthly transfer to their joint account. I waited, knowing the silence wouldn't last. The moment the spending stopped, she would surface. The anticipation was intense, a mixture of dread and a dark satisfaction. The call came as I expected, raw with fury and panic. Mother, my card was declined. I was humiliated at the boutique. What are you doing? Her voice was a shrill, desperate thing. I took a deep, steadying breath. This was my moment. My face adopted a look of absolute, unshakable calm. Oh, Chloe, dear. I purred, my voice dangerously low. A technical error, I suspect. I'm simply conducting a full financial audit of all family assets, after that little incident with the ring. Just ensuring everything is secure. I paused, letting the word secure hang in the air like a guillotine blade. Her silence on the other end was a symphony of kang-thang and dawning horror. I could almost picture her Quan mat draining of color. I offered one last saccharine blow. You understand, darling. I have to protect my legacy. I hung up a small, triumphant Han Juan, rising in my chest. I had just fired the first crippling shot. The counterstrike was swift, brutal, and utterly sickening. Chloe and Ethan realized I wasn't just auditing expenses, I was hunting. Instead of confessing, they chose to double down on deceit, aiming for the nuclear option, gaslighting, and character assassination. A week after the financial cutoff, Marcus Thorne called with the sickening news Ethan and Chloe had filed an emergency petition with the probate court. Their claim was not for money, but to seize control of Ethan's trust and demand a court-appointed conservator for me, citing my significant mental deterioration and delusional instability. My internal reaction was a silent scream of absolute outrage. The audacity. She's trying to weaponize my history, twisting my trauma into a legal excuse to steal everything. My deepest inner conflict raged. This woman wasn't just a thief. She was a sociopath, attempting to erase my sanity and my identity. The legal filing was accompanied by Chloe's meticulously crafted narrative detailing my erratic behavior. She fabricated stories of my obsessive paranoia regarding the ring violent outbursts if anyone went near my safe, and how I was suffering from a delusion of grand theft, all supported by a suspiciously quick, biased affidavit from a psychologist she clearly bribed, suggesting I had severe obsessive-compulsive disorder and persecutory delusions. When I saw Chloe at the preliminary hearing, her face was a study in feigned sorrow. She kept her eyes downcast, her body language conveying a quiet, tragic burden. "Mother, I'm heartbroken to do this," she whispered, her voice thick with fake emotion. "But you're hurting yourself. Ethan and I just want to protect you and your assets from your own illness." She was painting herself as the devoted daughter-in-law, tragically forced to commit her sick mother-in-law. I stared at her, my face devoid of expression, yet radiating a profound disgust. I then turned my piercing gaze onto my son Ethan. He was my greatest source of pain. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his jaw clenched. He couldn't meet my eyes. He mumbled, "Mom, this is the only way to stop this spiral before you destroy the family reputation." My internal world was consumed by a single focused thought. They tried to steal my wealth, but now they are trying to steal my mind. I will not let her win. The desire to expose her was now less about money and more about defending my fundamental reality. The final confrontation was not a polite debate. It was a detonation. Marcus Thorne had prepared my defense not to prove my sanity, but to establish their guilt. We allowed the hearing to begin, letting Chloe and Ethan confidently present their case of my supposed mental decline, their faces radiating false sympathy. But the moment Thorne rose, the atmosphere in the courtroom turned glacial. His voice, steady and commanding, cut through their deceit. "We do not dispute Mrs. Vance's fixation on the ring, Your Honor. The reality is her delusion is merely the discovery of a serious felony, and this entire petition is a calculated criminal attempt to seize assets and cover the tracks of grand larceny." The claim alone caused Chloe's practiced composure to falter, her eyes widening in a flash of genuine fear. Thorne then delivered the first crushing blow by calling Mr. Sterling. The jeweler's testimony was the unassailable objective truth. With cold scientific detail, he presented the microscopic evidence, the lack of the Vance family's signature laser inscription, the specific gravity report confirming the stone was a low-value lab-grown imposter. He held up the pictures of the magnificent original and contrasted them with the $50,000 replacement. The technical facts were a physical hammer blow against their lies. I watched Chloe across the room. Her skin went pale, her hand reflexively flew to her mouth, and her entire body seemed to cave inward. The mask of the innocent wife violently ripped away. But the final fatal shot came with the next witness, Sarah, Chloe's once loyal confidant. Sarah's testimony was secured after Thorne presented undeniable proof of her minor role in facilitating the ring's sale. Facing charges herself, she chose self-preservation. She tearfully recounted how Chloe had bragged about the genius swap, detailing how she used the Met Gala as the perfect alibi and sold the real diamond through an offshore broker to secretly fund her ambitious business launch. The court gasped. The sound was a surge of intense drama and shock. Thorne then pinned Ethan. Confronted with Sarah's direct evidence of his wife's conspiracy and the damning financial trail, Ethan finally shattered. His head bowed low over the table, his frame shaking with shame. He barely managed to choke out the confession he had chosen to believe Chloe's elaborate lies, that I was just making it up over his own mother. The bitterness of his betrayal was palpable, but so was his crushing defeat. The judge, clearly appalled by the depths of their deceit, swiftly dismissed the conservatorship petition and immediately referred Chloe for criminal prosecution for theft and fraud. I felt a tremendous, satisfying release. I looked at Chloe now, sobbing violently, her entire plan exposed and ruined. My gaze was steady, cool, and ultimately victorious. The moment was profoundly Thoa Man, not because she was suffering, but because the truth of Vance's legacy and my own sanity had been unequivocally restored. The emotional release following the judge's ruling was overwhelming. It was the intense physical sensation of a crushing weight finally being lifted. I had achieved absolute legal victory, but the immediate feeling was a peculiar mix of profound relief and a deep aching sorrow. The true moment of vindication and Jingdang came when the authorities confirmed the recovery of the genuine $3 million diamond forced out of the hands of the frightened offshore broker. Holding that Tiffany blue box again, feeling the substantial weight of the real blazing stone, wasn't about money. It was about reclaiming the integrity of my family's past. I secured it in a new high-tech vault, and the relief that washed over me was a wave of liberation. I had successfully defended the legacy against a greedy, calculated attack, proving that my decades of vigilance were not paranoia, but necessary foresight. However, the victory was deeply bittersweet because of Ethan. The moment I looked at my son, shattered and ashamed by his wife's betrayal and his own lack of faith, the triumph faded into a profound sadness. I had successfully shielded him from financial ruin, but I had failed to protect him from the painful consequences of his own misplaced trust. I had to speak the difficult truth, my voice gentle but thick with disappointment. I am bitterly disappointed, Ethan. You allowed yourself to be manipulated into believing your mother was insane. You must confront the severity of your error in judgment. The pain in his eyes reflected the pain in my own heart, the sorrow of a mother who had to witness her son's profound moral failure. Ethan, devastated, immediately filed for divorce, his body language conveying absolute brokenness. He came to me seeking comfort, and I held him, but my internal dialogue was clear. I will be his mother, but I must stop being his financial shield. I realized that to truly live a life of Giaifeng liberation, I couldn't remain in the house, filled with the ghosts of fear and betrayal. I decided to drastically downsize and change my environment. I sold my controlling business interests, streamlining my fortune, and purchased a sun-drenched high-rise penthouse in Florida. This action was symbolic. I was letting go of the stress of corporate control and the shadow of the past. The day I closed the door on my old life was the culmination of my liberation. The ring was now safely protected in a legal blind trust, ensuring no single person, not even Ethan, could access it without strict controls. That act was the final boundary, securing the asset forever. I had lost a deceitful daughter-in-law and endured a harrowing legal battle with my son, but the trade-off was gaining unshakable self-respect and the freedom to finally start living for myself. The sense of day fulfillment wasn't about the defeat of Chloe, but about my own strength in the face of immense personal betrayal. I had fought to protect my peace, and I had earned the right to that Florida sunshine. The gentle Florida sun pouring into my penthouse was supposed to bring peace, yet the overwhelming silence only amplified the civil war raging inside me. The court case was closed. The thief exposed, but the relentless question of my own conduct continued to plague me. I would often sit gazing out at the endless ocean, my face etched with deep introspection, my body unable to fully relax from the weeks of relentless tension. I was undeniably right to fight for my family's $3 million legacy. No one should passively accept grand theft and fraud. I was right to use the tools of a seasoned businesswoman to crush the conspiracy. I am a survivor, and I will never let anyone turn me into a fool or a victim. That conviction brought a determined firmness to my jaw and my shoulders. Yet this certainty was constantly undermined by the nagging reality of the collateral damage. Where did my own judgment falter? I continuously replayed the moment I offered Chloe the spare safe key. My hands would clench involuntarily, a silent gesture of self-reproach, when I recalled that impulsive, foolish act. I realized I hadn't given the key purely out of genuine trust, but perhaps out of a desperate need for Chloe's acceptance, a desire to be perceived as the generous, non-interfering mother-in-law. By placing that massive, life-changing temptation directly in front of her, I had failed to protect both my assets and arguably her own moral boundaries. I had set a trap, albeit unintentionally, and I needed to acknowledge that. Furthermore, my reaction was instantly contaminated by the bitter trauma of my past. The moment I saw her flaunting the ring, my eyes narrowed and the old deep-seated fear of betrayal took over. I immediately saw the past business thief in her not a family member who had simply made a mistake. This deep-seated emotional reaction transformed a boundary issue into a full-scale catastrophe. My response was the ruthless, chilling precision of a cornered executive, which was powerful in court, but utterly destructive to the fabric of my home life. The deepest wound was the temporary alienation from Ethan. I'd stand by the railing, my body tense, and still wrestling with the guilt of pushing my son to the brink. I had been so focused on defeating Chloe that I neglected the emotional survival of my child. My immediate financial retaliation and the intense legal secrecy, while strategically sound, left Ethan vulnerable and convinced him that Chloe's fabricated story of my instability was believable. I should have involved him, shown him the evidence privately, and allowed him to reach the painful conclusion himself, rather than forcing him to choose sides in a public legal war. My kamsuk for Ethan was a turbulent mix of fierce love and profound regret. I realized that my victory was incomplete. I had won the battle against Chloe's crime, but I risked losing the sanctity of my relationship with Ethan. To truly achieve the promised liberation, I had to stop justifying my actions and start healing the damage caused by my own fear-driven decisions. The time for the ruthless general was over. The time for the repentant mother had finally arrived. The true resolution of this entire ordeal did not arrive with the judge's gavel. It arrived in the profound quiet of my new life, prompting a necessary, painful self-reckoning. I realized the deepest flaw that led to this catastrophic conflict was not a failure of vigilance, but a failure of emotional health. The persistent, deep-seated fear of being betrayed again. That fear first manifested as an overly generous, almost desperate attempt to buy acceptance by giving Chloe the safe key, and later as the ruthless, overly aggressive retaliation when the theft was confirmed. I finally understood that healing those old traumatic wounds was the absolute prerequisite for building any healthy relationship moving forward. I learned that my power isn't in my wealth, but in my ability to acknowledge my own part in the drama. Du kien bat book de toi ting lin. La phai chấp nhận rằng tôi đã tạo ra một môi trường dễ bị tổn thương bởi sự thiếu minh bạch của chính mình. I had to forgive myself for my strategic mistakes before I could truly forgive Ethan for his emotional ones. My self-reflection confirmed 3 crucial lessons. Firstly, I recognized the overriding need for emotional boundaries to be strictly separated from financial control. I had allowed my deep-seated desire for a picture-perfect, harmonious family to fatally blur the professional lines of asset management. My kamzuk now is one of quiet clarity. I must be a mother first, supporting Ethan unconditionally while maintaining and enforcing ironclad rules for the family's finances. Secondly, I learned the true cost of silence. I should have communicated my growing unease about Chloe's material obsession to Ethan privately early on, instead of suffering in silence to avoid conflict. My passive omission, born out of cowardice to rock the boat, allowed the problem to swell into a crisis. Thirdly, I redefined true power. My strength isn't rooted in my ability to destroy an opponent, but in my capacity to admit fault and patiently rebuild. The most vital step was repairing the profound damage done to my relationship with Ethan, the true innocent casualty. I realized I couldn't simply demand reconciliation. I had to earn it. I flew Ethan down to Florida for a private extended visit. The conversation was agonizing but necessary. With a deep, genuine emotion that I rarely allowed myself to show, I looked at him, my eyes filled with maternal sincerity, and said, "Ethan, I was so focused on being legally right about Chloe's crime that I failed you as a mother. I was wrong to cut you off financially without warning. I behaved like a vengeful CEO, not a supportive parent, and I placed you in an impossible position. For that, I am truly sorry." This act of vulnerability was the required condition for rebuilding our bond, showing him that his mother was capable of admitting fault. To permanently remove the object of conflict and symbolize my commitment to change, I formalized the ring's status, transferring it into an irrevocable blind family trust. I told Ethan, "This is no longer a symbol of my personal trust. It is a symbol of our shared responsibility and mutual protection." This decision was driven by objectivity, ensuring neither of us could act unilaterally. Most importantly, I committed to being a source of non-judgmental support during his difficult divorce. I didn't offer financial bailouts, but emotional, unwavering presence. Yuto kamsuk a day, lasubao yung kumduking, reinforcing the critical message that my love for him is separate from his mistakes or the crimes of his ex-wife. However, the agonizing core of my self-reflection lay in the fatal flaw of my initial reaction. The single greatest decision error was in prioritizing aggressive, immediate retaliation over a strategically phased information disclosure. When Mr. Sterling confirmed the swap, my immediate response was guided by the traumatic fear of being defrauded. Instead of secretly and calmly presenting the incontrovertible evidence, the jeweler's report, and the missing laser inscription directly to Ethan, thereby forcing him to realize his wife's guilt before she could act, I chose the path of the angry matriarch. My swift punitive move, cutting the finances, and secretly installing cameras, made me look precisely like the erratic, tyrannical figure Chloe was painting in her legal documents. This aggressive response gave Chloe the perfect credible ammunition for the climax too, the claim that I was mentally unstable. My Quinn mat still tightens with regret when I think of the wasted emotional energy and legal expense. My sigh sought was a failure of strategic patience and emotional control. While I still won the case, the intense agonizing drama that ensued was the direct result of my emotional haste. I learned that sometimes the quietest, most restrained move is the most powerful, and that true strength lies in strategic composure. My friends, now that the chaos has subsided, I hope my story offers something more valuable than mere courtroom drama. It is a harsh, expensive lesson about the importance of safeguarding not just your millions, but the very structural integrity of your family's relationships. As fiercely independent Americans, we often value financial autonomy and personal privacy. But when those concepts collide within a family framework, the results can be devastating. I realized that my crisis was not simply a theft. It was a profound breakdown of three fundamental principles: empathy, boundaries, and communication. Firstly, I learned that empathy does not mean enabling. I initially mistook my sheer generosity for genuine empathy, believing that by giving Chloe the spare key, I was showing her ultimate trust. This was a critical failure. True empathy demands that you understand a person's weaknesses, their hunger, their ambition, and then you act to protect both them and yourself from that weakness. I knew Chloe craved status, yet I carelessly placed a massive, life-altering temptation right in her path without any safeguards. That was not understanding. That was dangerous negligence. The lesson is clear. Be compassionate, but never be apathetic to risk. Ask yourself, is my kindness creating a safety net, or am I building a runway for bad behavior? Empathy must always be tethered to realism and strong accountability. Secondly, I understood that boundaries are contracts, not walls. My most significant failure was blurring a critical financial rule into an ambiguous family tradition. When I vaguely promised the ring will be yours someday, I created a dangerous gray area that Chloe ruthlessly exploited. In any financial situation, particularly in an individualistic society like ours, boundaries cannot be implied. They must be explicit, clear contracts. I should have stated unequivocally, this asset is held in a trust for the future. Any use requires mutual written consent and a binding insurance policy. If you cannot communicate a boundary clearly and consistently enforce it, it is not a boundary at all. It's an open invitation for conflict. Strong boundaries are not a sign of rejection. They are a sign of respect, protecting the relationship from the destructive forces of temptation and resentment. Thirdly, and most painfully, communication must be truthful, not convenient. My ultimate strategic error was failing to deliver the devastating truth about the fraud to Ethan privately with facts before moving to financial retaliation. My communication was driven by fear and anger, calling to demand answers, and aggressively cutting funds, which instantly validated Chloe's lie that I was a hysterical, mentally unstable tyrant. Effective communication requires prioritizing the delivery of necessary difficult truth, even if it is uncomfortable. I should have presented him with the cold objective evidence first: the jeweler's report, the density test, the missing inscription, forcing him to draw his own painful conclusion about his wife's guilt. My fear-driven silence and subsequent aggressive action made him the perfect unwitting pawn in her game. This story is a stark reminder to everyone. Never let fear dictate your communication strategy. Use facts, establish clear boundaries, and practice a tough love empathy that protects but never enables. This is the only way to safeguard your legacy, your sanity, and the future of your family. So there you have it, friends. The saga of the $3 million ring and the ultimate betrayal that nearly cost me my sanity and my relationship with my son. The battle was long and painful, but emerging from it, I found a renewed sense of strength and a clear path forward built on honesty and boundaries. If you take anything away from this intense experience, I hope it's the imperative to draw clear lines in your own life and never allow fear to dictate your actions or silence your truth. I am now focused entirely on rebuilding and embracing the second chapter of my life here in Florida. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. What would you have done differently the moment you saw your DIL on the red carpet? Let me know in the comments below. If you found value in my journey, the lessons on resilience, the necessity of clear communication, and the power of fighting for your truth, please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me share these valuable, unfiltered stories. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss my next video, where I'll discuss the painful, slow process of rebuilding my trust with Ethan and navigating the complexities of his divorce. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.